Welcome to episode 28 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we will continue with the epic tale of Heracles, with the story of Heracles and Admetus. After Heracles had suddenly left the palace of King Ichala and wandered far and wide, a curious thing happened. In the city of Pherae in Thessaly lived King Admetus with his young and beautiful wife, Alcestis. These two had several beautiful children and were surrounded by the affection and loyalty of very happy subjects. Long ago, when Apollo had slain the Cyclops and had fled Olympus and had been compelled to serve a mortal, Admetus, the son of Pherae, had welcomed him kindly and made him a shepherd over his flocks. After Zeus had restored the sun god to favor, he became the king's patron, and ever since had bestowed his favors upon him. When the span of Admetus' life was drawing to a close, Apollo, being a god, knew of this and had wrung from the fates a promise that the king could escape coming to Hades from the fates if he would provide another mortal in his place. And Apollo therefore left Olympus and sought out his former host to warn him of his approaching death, and at the same time to reveal the secret of the means whereby he might evade it. Admetus was an honest man, but he loved life. And not only he, but all his family and his subjects were greatly alarmed to learn that the pillar of the royal house, the husband and father, the kind ruler of the people, was to be taken from them. So the king went about and looked for a friend who would be willing to die for him. But there was not a single one who was willing to do this. Although they had all broken into loud lament when they heard of the loss they were to suffer, they grew silent and cold when they were told of the conditions by which the king's life could be prolonged. Even his old father, Pherae, and his aged mother, both of whom could die any day, did not want to give up the few hours left to them to save their son. Only Alcestis, in the fullness of her bloom, only his wife, the mother of his children, in the lovely spring of her life, was moved by such pure and unselfish love for her husband that she declared she would give up the light of the sun for his sake. Scarcely had she said these words when Thanatos, the dark god of death, approached the palace to claim his victim and lead her down to the realm of the shades. For he knew exactly the day and the hour the fates had decreed for the death of Admetus. When Apollo saw death coming, he swiftly left the king's house, lest he, a god of life, be defiled by the sinister presence. When devout Alcestis felt that her time was come, she purified herself with flowing water, as befitted an offering to death, took festive raiment and strings of jewels out of the chest carved of cedar, and went thus adorned to the household shrine to pray to the goddess of the underworld. Then she clasped her husband and her children in her arms. Day by day she wasted more and more away, until at last, the appointed hour, she entered the chamber where she was to receive the messenger from the lower world. Her family and her serving women accompanied her. She bade them a solemn farewell. "Let me tell you what is in my heart," she said to her husband. "Because your life is dearer to me than my own, I am about to die for you before death was decreed for me, even though I could have taken a second husband and probably lived happily. But I did not want to live without you and look upon my orphaned children. Your father and mother have failed you, though it would have been better for them to die, for then you would not have to be lonely and bring up the children by yourself without their mother. But since the gods have willed it, I only beg you to remember what I have done, and not to give these little ones, whom you love as I do, another mother, who out of envy might be cruel to them." With many tears in her eyes, her husband swore that just as she had been his in life, so in death too only she and none other should be his wife. Then Alcestis led the crying little ones toward him and fell fainting to the ground. It chanced that while they were preparing for the burial, Heracles and his wanderings reached Pherae and came to the palace gates. The servants admitted him, and while he was talking to them, Admetus himself appeared. Hiding his sorrows, he extended a warm welcome to him, and when Heracles, struck by his robe of mourning, questioned him, he did not want to sadden or perhaps even drive him away, and answered so vaguely that his guest was given the impression that a distant relative had died in the course of a visit in the palace. So Heracles' merry mood was unmarred, and he had one of the slaves conduct him to the guest chamber and serve him with wine. When he noticed the man's downcast air, he reproached him with it. "Why do you look so serious and solemn?" he asked. "It is a servant's duty to be obliging to strangers, and if some alien woman died in this house, what of it? Dying is, after all, the common lot of mortals. The gloomy heart have a sad time of life. Go get a wreath on your brow, as I have done, and drink with me. I know very well that a brimming cup will soon smooth the lines from your forehead." But the slave turned away in distress. "We have suffered a blow," he replied, "which drives away all thought of laughter and feasting. The son of Pherae is indeed most hospitable, perhaps too hospitable to admit a light-hearted stranger to his house of mourning." "Why should I not be light of heart?" asked Heracles. "Because an unknown woman has died." "Unknown woman!" cried the servant in amazement. "She may have been unknown to you, but not to us." "Then Admetus did not tell me the whole truth about this matter." Heracles observed thoughtfully, and the servant said, "Be as merry as your soul desire. The ruler's bereavement concerns only his friends and those who serve him." But now Heracles gave him no peace until he found out what had happened. "It is possible," he cried. "Admetus lost his fair and noble wife, and yet received a stranger with such perfect hospitality. I felt some secret reluctance about entering these gates, and now I have wreathed my head in a house of mourning, and drunk and made merry. Tell me, where is Alcestis buried?" "If you take the road that leads to Larissa," answered the slave, "you will see a splendid monument which has already been put up for her grave." And as he uttered these words, he began to weep and left the room. When Heracles found himself alone, he did not break into lamentation, but made a quick resolve. "I must save this woman who has died," he said to himself. "I must bring her back to her husband. In no other way can I repay his courtesy. I shall then go to her grave and wait for Thanatos, the ruler of the dead. I shall see him coming to drink the sacrificial blood poured for him over the monument. Then I shall leap out of hiding and catch hold of him. No power on earth shall wrest him from me until he agrees to give up his prey." And having made his decision, he left the palace secretly and silently. Admetus had returned to his solitary house and lonely children. He mourned his wife deeply, and no faithful servant could comfort him in his despair. But suddenly Heracles crossed his threshold, holding a veiled woman by the hand. "It was not well done, O king, to conceal from me the death of your wife," he said. "You received me as though you were mourning a mere stranger, and so unknowingly I did great wrong, and made libations in a house bereaved of its mistress. But I shall not disturb you any longer in your sorrow. I only return for one thing. This girl I have here, she is mine, a reward I received for victory in a contest. Now I am going to win fresh combats, and while I am away, you shall have her for your handmaid. Guard her as possession from a friend." Admetus was appalled at Heracles' words. "I did not conceal my wife's death from you because I scorned or underestimated a friend," he said, "but only because I did not wish to add my sorrow by having you leave and go to another's house. As for this woman, I beg you to give her to some other man in Pherae, not to me, who has borne so much. You must have many friends in the city. How can I look after a girl in my house without weeping? Besides, she cannot live in the men's quarters, and neither can I install her in the rooms of my dead wife. Far be it from me. I should fear the gossip of the people of Pherae, and the reproaches of her when she is gone." But although the king had rejected her, a curious longing drew his eyes to the veiled shape before him. "Whoever you may be," he said to her, "you strangely resemble Alcestis in stature. By the gods, Hercules, I implore you to take this woman away, and not add to the torment of one who is already suffering too greatly. Whenever I saw her, I should feel as though I were seeing my wife. I should burst into tears, and my sorrow would be renewed again and again and again." Heracles hid his true thoughts and answered sadly, "Oh, that Zeus had given me the strength to rescue your noble wife from the realms of the shades, to lead her back to the light, and so repay you and your great kindness." "I know you would," replied Admetus, "but when has one dead ever returned from the underworld?" "Well," Heracles continued in a livelier manner, "since this indeed cannot be, let time ease your sorrow, for the dead take no pleasure in the grief of the living. Do not entirely close your mind to the hope that a second wife may someday bring cheer into your life. And finally, for my sake, receive this girl I have brought you into your house. At least try it. The moment you find that she annoys you, you can give her leave." So Heracles pressed Admetus, who did not wish to offend his guest. Reluctantly, he commanded a servant to conduct her to the inner apartments, but Heracles would not hear of this. "Do not entrust this priceless gem of mine to the hand of slaves," he said. "You yourself, if it so please you, my friend, shall lead her in." "No," said Admetus, "I shall not lay a finger on her. Even the lightest touch would seem to me a violation of the pledge I gave her who is dead." But Heracles gave him no peace until he took the veiled woman by the hand. "And now cherish her," he said, "and look at her closely to make sure that she really resembles your wife, and end your grieving." With this, he parted her veils, and the king, incredulous and amazed, beheld his own wife. Almost fainting with emotion, he held her, who had returned to life, and feasted his eyes on her in gladness and fear, while the demigod described his encounter with Thanatos, how he had seized him at the burial mound and wrestled with him for his prize. When the king knew at last that this was Alcestis, he clasped her in his arms, but she remained silent and could not reply to his loving words. "You will not hear her voice," explained Heracles, "until the dawn of the third day, when the bonds of death will be severed. But do not hesitate to take her into your chamber and rejoice in her presence. She is yours in return for your noble hospitality to strangers. And now you must let me go where the fates call me." "Go in peace, then, Heracles," Admetus called after him. "You have guided me back to a better life, for now I am not only happy, but thankfully aware of my bliss. All my people shall celebrate with choruses and dances The fragrant smoke of sacrifice will rise from the altars, and in all this we shall think of you, O mighty son of Zeus, with gratitude and love. And here I end my tale for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.